What happens when a future king decides that his own brother no longer belongs to the crown? Think about that for a second. Not a distant cousin, not a rebellious royal staffer, but the brother who once stood beside him at their mother's funeral, the brother who vowed they'd always face the world together. And yet, here we are. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Prince William, the man preparing to inherit the throne of the United Kingdom, has reportedly blocked Prince Harry's quiet plan to return as a working royal. Not only that, but every single one of Harry's former duties, the charities he once championed, the roles he once wore as his identity, have been handed to someone entirely unexpected, Sir Timothy. Yes, you heard that right, Sir Timothy. The name may not mean much to the public yet, but behind palace gates, his presence is already shifting the entire power dynamic of the monarchy. He's the man William now trusts where once he trusted Harry. And if royal insiders are to be believed, this was not a spontaneous decision. It was a long, deliberate, and devastatingly calculated move. Before we go deeper, ask yourself this. What would make William, the calm, dutiful, and famously reserved heir, finally cut off his brother for good? What could push him to close the door so firmly that even the king himself could not reopen it? Because this isn't just about family. This is about the future of the monarchy itself. Let's rewind. The story begins not with an announcement, but with a whisper. Rumors began to swirl that Prince Harry, now living thousands of miles away in Montecito, California, was considering a return. Not as a full royal, of course, but as a part-time figure, someone who could split his time between public duty and private independence. To the public, it might have sounded reasonable. After all, he was born into this world. He knew the protocols, the expectations, the relentless scrutiny. And perhaps, somewhere deep inside, he missed it. Not the palace walls, but the sense of belonging. But in the eyes of the palace, it was far more complicated. Inside Buckingham and Kensington, a proposal like that would challenge every core principle of the firm. You're either in or out. There's no halfway house, no selective service, no part-time prince. It's all or nothing. And William, more than anyone, understood the danger of bending that rule. From the moment Harry and Meghan stepped away in 2020, William had carried the weight of keeping the royal brand intact. He'd seen how easily one misstep could spiral into public chaos, how a single headline could unravel decades of careful tradition. So when whispers reached him that Harry wanted back in, even in a limited capacity, the reaction was swift, cold, and final. But what's truly shocking isn't just William's refusal. It's how he ensured that Harry's proposal could never resurface again. You see, William didn't just say no. He replaced Harry entirely. And that's where Sir Timothy enters the story. Now, before we dive into who Sir Timothy is, because trust me, that's an entire revelation on its own, let's pause for a moment and ask a bigger question. Why would Harry even want to return? Wasn't he the one who said he was happier, freer, finally living life on his own terms? So what changed? According to those close to the situation, it wasn't about money or fame. It was about legacy. Harry reportedly told friends that his children, Archie and Lilibet, deserved to know their heritage, not from tabloids, but from experience. He wanted them to see what service meant, to understand their grandmother's values. And maybe, deep down, he wanted redemption, a chance to prove that stepping away didn't mean turning his back on his country. But here's the contradiction. While Harry might have been seeking reconnection, the institution saw danger. Every move he's made since Megxit has been polarizing. The interviews, the memoir, the Netflix documentary, each one added layers of tension between the brothers, until their relationship was barely recognizable. So when this new proposal surfaced, William wasn't just hearing Harry wants to help. He was hearing, Harry wants control again. Harry wants a platform again. Harry wants to rewrite the rules again. And William, for all his compassion, couldn't risk that. Not with the king's health reportedly under watch. Not with the world already questioning the monarchy's relevance. But what's fascinating is the way William handled it. No outburst. No public feud. No open confrontation. He did what he's always been trained to do. Move strategically, quietly, and completely behind closed doors. According to palace aides, William initiated a private review of all vacant patronages, essentially the roles once filled by senior royals who had stepped back. On paper, it looked like simple administration. But within weeks, one by one, every position that once carried Harry's name was reassigned to Sir Timothy, a man who, until recently, was known only to insiders as a respected military advisor and longtime royal confidant. To some, this was William's subtle message: there's no going back. To others, it was a symbolic exile, not just removing Harry's duties, but erasing his royal identity altogether. But there's something else here, something most people miss. William didn't just act out of anger. He acted out of fear. Because the last time the monarchy allowed a royal to half return, half leave, it nearly tore the institution apart. Remember Edward VIII, the king who abdicated for love, but still tried to influence palace affairs afterward? History never forgets. And William, the heir who studied that history since birth, wasn't about to repeat it. Still, there's one undeniable truth that makes this story so haunting. No matter how royal the titles, this is still a family. Two brothers, two sons of Diana. And yet, they couldn't be further apart. Imagine being William, watching your brother walk away, watching him criticize the family you're preparing to lead, watching every headline pit you against the person you once trusted most. How do you protect the crown without destroying your bloodline? That's the impossible question William has been answering quietly, move by move, year by year. And now, with this latest decision, cutting off Harry's royal return and giving his roles to Sir Timothy, it seems he's answered it once and for all. But not everyone agrees he was right. Inside the palace, there's a growing divide. Some senior courtiers reportedly believe that William's decision, while logical, is emotionally dangerous. That by closing the door too firmly, he risks deepening the rift to a point of no return. Others, however, see it as leadership, a test of what kind of king he will be. Uncompromising. Duty first. Emotion second. And yet, there's a twist. Because Sir Timothy isn't just any royal appointee. His relationship with the crown goes back decades, further than most people realize. And sources suggest his connection to William is personal, even secretive. It's said that Sir Timothy once served closely with Prince Philip and was a quiet advisor during William's university years. The kind of man you'd never see in the spotlight, but who knows exactly how the palace operates from within. So was this about replacing Harry? Or was it about preparing someone else, someone loyal, controllable, and fully devoted to the system, to protect the institution's image in its most fragile moment? And here's where things get even more tangled. Because just as William was solidifying this new inner circle, Harry was reportedly planning a move of his own, one that could have forced the palace to confront everything it was trying to bury. But we'll get to that later. For now, picture this: the brothers' paths diverging permanently. One consolidating power inside the palace walls, surrounded by advisors and formality. The other watching from across the ocean, powerless, frustrated, and determined to be heard. It's almost Shakespearean, isn't it? A story of loyalty, betrayal, and the heavy price of duty. But unlike fiction, these decisions will shape real futures. For the monarchy, for the brothers, and for the next generation of royals. And while William's move might seem ruthless, there's one haunting question that refuses to fade. Did he do this to punish Harry, or to protect him? Because somewhere, deep within those gilded halls, there's a truth no one's saying out loud. The same truth that once echoed through their mother's words. The crown will always come first. And tonight, that prophecy feels truer than ever. Imagine receiving a message that could change everything. Not a text, not an email, but a plan so bold it threatens to rewrite the rules of one of the oldest monarchies in the world. That's exactly what Prince William reportedly faced when he first learned about Prince Harry's secret return plan. And make no mistake, this was not a casual suggestion or a fleeting whim. This was a calculated effort by Harry to re-enter the world he once left, to reclaim a space he felt was still his, and to prove, in some small but powerful way, that he could be both independent and royal at the same time. It began quietly. Friends close to Harry say he had been mulling over a limited return for months, perhaps even years, quietly reaching out to certain palace insiders, gauging how a part-time royal arrangement might work. The idea, on the surface, seemed reasonable. After all, Harry had left the royal household to escape the relentless glare of public scrutiny. But he had also left behind a legacy of charities, patronages, and projects that were still unfinished. Could he, now experienced and independent, pick up where he left off without disrupting the delicate balance of the monarchy? Harry's argument was simple. He wanted to serve. Not to reclaim power, not to dominate headlines, and certainly not to compete with William. He simply wanted a chance to contribute in a way that felt meaningful. Imagine, for a moment, the complexity of that position. On one hand, he was a global celebrity, someone whose every word was dissected by the media. On the other, he was a man trying to navigate the strict hierarchy of a centuries-old institution, one that tolerates no deviation from its rules. And yet, he believed there was a path back. Sources suggest Harry's plan included returning to London for a series of ceremonial duties, attending key royal events, and overseeing some of his previous charitable work. There was talk of him mentoring young royals, giving speeches, and lending his influence to causes he had championed for years. The vision was carefully curated to avoid conflict with William's role, the king's authority, and the royal family's public image. In Harry's mind, it was a win-win. The monarchy would benefit from his contributions, and he would reconnect with the family he missed deeply. But as with all things involving Harry, nothing was simple. William, who had been quietly monitoring the situation from the moment whispers reached Kensington, reportedly reacted with immediate concern. For him, the problem wasn't Harry's intention. It was the precedent it could set. The monarchy is built on clarity. A royal either serves or steps away. The moment you allow exceptions, even small ones, you risk chaos. And William knew better than anyone what that chaos could look like. To understand William's perspective, you need to remember the tension that had existed between the brothers for years. Their relationship had been strained ever since Harry's departure in 2020. Public appearances, interviews, and the infamous memoir all contributed to a narrative that painted William as distant, controlling, and even unkind. Whether or not that perception was accurate mattered little. Perception is everything when you're trying to maintain an institution that survives on tradition, loyalty, and public trust. William's decision, therefore, was a balancing act. On one hand, he didn't want to alienate his brother further. On the other, he couldn't allow a plan that might disrupt the monarchy's carefully constructed order. It was not a matter of personal dislike, it was a matter of duty. Harry, according to insiders, had anticipated resistance. That's why his plan was so secretive. Only a handful of trusted aides knew the details, and even fewer knew the exact timing of the proposed return. Yet, despite the secrecy, information has a way of leaking, especially when the stakes are this high. And when William found out, it wasn't through an official channel. It came via whispers, rumors, and the subtle leaks that permeate palace life. What did William feel when he first realized Harry's intentions? Some sources describe a mix of disbelief and incredulity. How could Harry, who had so vehemently rejected royal life, now hope to step back in as if nothing had happened? How could he believe that the same institution he criticized could simply accommodate his return? For William, the audacity was shocking. And yet, despite that shock, William acted swiftly. Instead of confronting Harry immediately, he convened a private meeting with senior advisors, strategists, and family confidants. The goal was clear: assess the situation, weigh the risks, and decide whether Harry's plan could be allowed, or if it had to be blocked entirely. Reports suggest these meetings were tense, often lasting hours, and filled with debates over precedent, public perception, and the emotional ramifications for both brothers. One recurring theme, insiders say, was fear. Fear that Harry's return could be interpreted as a royal endorsement of his previous critiques. Fear that the public might see William as weak if he allowed the half-return. Fear that the delicate balance of the monarchy would tilt under scrutiny, exposing vulnerabilities that decades of careful management had protected. And then there was Meghan. While Harry's proposal focused on him personally, the presence of Meghan complicated everything. Her influence, her celebrity, and her outspoken nature were all factors that William reportedly considered. Could the monarchy withstand another media storm? Could the institution survive another narrative that framed the royal family as divided? These questions loomed large. The next step, according to insiders, was a decision. William reportedly concluded that Harry's plan could not proceed. Not because of malice, not because of resentment, but because the monarchy's integrity depended on it. The brothers' relationship, fragile as it was, became secondary to the rules of the institution. But how do you reject a plan from your own brother without igniting a public feud? That's where strategy came into play. William didn't issue a public statement. He didn't confront Harry directly. Instead, he moved silently, systematically reassigning every patronage, every duty, every role that could have been part of Harry's proposed return. And that's when Sir Timothy entered the picture, a man whose name had barely registered in public consciousness, but whose influence in palace circles was substantial. By the time Harry became aware of the reassignments, the decision had already been executed. On paper, it appeared to be routine, a senior royal taking on additional responsibilities. But in reality, it was a calculated message. The door was closed. And yet, Harry reportedly did not give up immediately. Friends say he considered alternative ways to return, to participate, and to reconcile with William and the family. Private conversations, discreet meetings, and even informal proposals were explored. Each time, William's response remained the same: polite, firm, and unyielding. For Harry, the rejection was more than procedural. It was personal. It was a reminder that despite blood ties, family loyalty has limits. That in the hierarchy of monarchy, even a brother cannot override the system. That the institution, above all else, comes first. But the story does not end there. Because while William had effectively blocked Harry's return, he had also set in motion a series of events that would ripple through the family, the media, and the world. The reassignment of duties to Sir Timothy, the quiet consolidation of power, and the emotional fallout between the brothers created a tension that was palpable even from thousands of miles away. And as we'll see in the chapters ahead, this secret return plan is far more than a failed attempt by Harry to reclaim his role. It is a story of loyalty, power, and the ruthless calculations required to protect an institution older than most nations. It is a story that exposes the fragility of family ties when they intersect with duty and legacy. By the end of this chapter, you should be asking yourself, what would you do if you were in William's shoes? If you were forced to choose between the man you grew up with and the institution you are destined to lead, which would you pick? And more importantly, what are the consequences, both personal and public, of making that choice? Because in the royal world, nothing is ever as simple as it seems. Every action, every decision, every whispered conversation has the potential to redefine history. And Harry's secret plan, though it may have seemed hopeful and innocent to him, was never going to be a small matter. Every family has its breaking points. Moments when patience runs thin, when love and loyalty clash with duty and responsibility. But for Prince William, heir to the British throne, the breaking point wasn't a family squabble over holidays or inheritance. It was far more serious. It was about legacy, the future of the monarchy, and a brother he could no longer fully trust. It's easy to imagine William as composed, almost untouchable, the picture of calm royal duty. But behind the perfectly tailored suits and carefully scripted public appearances lies a man constantly navigating tension, pressure, and responsibility on an extraordinary scale. And when news reached him that Harry intended to return as a part-time working royal, William reportedly felt something he hadn't experienced in years: a sharp, personal panic. The breaking point didn't come overnight. It had been building for years, like a storm brewing quietly over a calm sea. Since Harry and Meghan's exit from royal duties in 2020, William had watched his brother's every move with a mix of frustration and sorrow. The interviews, the tell-all memoir, the Netflix series, each one created waves, undermining the careful image William had worked to maintain. Every revelation about palace tension, perceived slights, or family disagreements cut deeper than the public ever understood. William, according to palace insiders, had tried to be patient. He had extended invitations, made private overtures, and allowed space for reconciliation. Yet Harry continued to speak publicly, positioning himself as both an outsider and a moral authority on the family he left behind. Every time William tried to bridge the gap, it felt as though Harry's words widened it further. Then came the secret plan. Hearing that Harry wanted back, even in a limited capacity, was reportedly the moment William realized the delicate balance he had been maintaining was about to collapse. The stakes were enormous. Allowing Harry to re-enter the royal fold even partially, could send a ripple effect through the institution, the public, and the media. It could undermine William's authority as the future king, and it could signal weakness, not just in the eyes of the public, but within the palace itself. It was at this moment, insiders suggest, that William reached his breaking point. Imagine the scene. William alone in a private room at Kensington Palace, surrounded by the quiet hum of history and tradition. Letters and documents lie across the desk, each one representing centuries of legacy. Advisors have presented their assessments, the risks, the optics, the possible public fallout. And in his mind, William sees the bigger picture. A monarchy at the edge, a family at war with itself, and a brother who seems intent on destabilizing both. William reportedly recalled words from his mother, Diana, who had always emphasized unity, courage, and the importance of family. But he also recalled the public scrutiny she endured and the fragility of life in the spotlight. He knew that history was unforgiving and that the monarchy would survive, but only if it maintained its strict hierarchy and sense of order. The breaking point wasn't about Harry as a person. It was about what Harry represented, a threat to clarity, continuity, and control. And in that moment, William made a decision, not rashly, but decisively. He would block the plan. But here's the subtle genius, or cruelty, depending on who you ask. William didn't confront Harry directly, nor did he make an emotional appeal. He didn't negotiate, debate, or plead. Instead, he began a silent, methodical process of reassignment. Harry's duties, his patronages, his responsibilities, every single one was quietly handed over to someone else. And that someone, of course, was Sir Timothy. This was a strategic coup, executed with the precision of a chess master. William removed the option entirely. There would be no half-steps, no compromise, no partial returns. For Harry, it wasn't just a denial. It was a complete erasure of the role he once held, a stark reminder that the institution comes before any personal desire. And while William acted with logic, the emotional toll was undeniable. He reportedly experienced a mix of sorrow, guilt, and relief. Sorrow, because the bond with his brother was fracturing further. Guilt, because he knew the decision would wound Harry deeply. Relief, because he believed he had protected the monarchy from potential scandal or instability. Palace insiders describe a man balancing responsibility and emotion with extraordinary skill. Publicly, William continued his duties with composure, attending events, meeting dignitaries, supporting charities. Privately, he wrestled with the knowledge that his actions might irreversibly damage his relationship with his brother. The breaking point, however, was not just a private moment of decision. It triggered a series of events that would shape the next chapter of royal life. The reassignment of duties to Sir Timothy, the consolidation of authority, and the quiet reinforcement of William's role as the future king all followed in swift succession. Each move reinforced the message: Harry's return is off the table. And yet, for all the strategic brilliance, there was a human cost. Family members whispered about the growing distance between the brothers. Advisors noted the subtle tension in meetings, the restrained gestures, the brief but meaningful silences. Friends of Harry reported that he was bewildered, hurt, and unsure how to respond without causing public drama. This was the paradox of William's breaking point. It was both a moment of clarity and a moment of conflict. By choosing the institution over the individual, he had acted decisively, yet he had deepened the familial rift. He had secured the monarchy's stability, but had also guaranteed ongoing personal strife. And in the royal world, such decisions rarely remain private for long. Rumors began to circulate, leaks appeared in tabloids, and the media started piecing together what had happened behind closed doors. Each report, whether accurate or not, added pressure, amplified scrutiny, and created the potential for public fallout. For William, the challenge became not just executing the decision, but managing its consequences. How do you uphold duty while maintaining personal relationships? How do you enforce boundaries with a brother who once shared your childhood, your grief, and your dreams? How do you lead an institution that watches every move you make, knowing that a single misstep could define history? The breaking point, therefore, was both an ending and a beginning. It marked the end of a certain type of brotherly hope, the hope that Harry could simply return and reconcile without consequence. It also marked the beginning of a new era of royal management, one in which William would assert authority quietly but firmly, ensuring that the monarchy remained intact, even at personal cost. It's worth noting that breaking points are rarely dramatic. They are not always filled with shouting or confrontation. In William's case, it was the quiet, calculated determination that spoke volumes. It was in the subtle reassignments, the private communications, the careful orchestration of loyalty and discretion. It was a breaking point that was as much about intellect and strategy as it was about emotion. And yet, despite the careful planning, the emotional weight lingered. William reportedly experienced sleepless nights, moments of reflection, and quiet doubts. Could he have handled it differently? Could there have been a compromise? Was loyalty to the institution worth the cost of a fractured relationship with his brother? These are questions that William will carry with him for life, questions that may never have definitive answers. And while the public sees the composed royal, the private reality is far more complex. Decisions like these do not happen in a vacuum. They reverberate through the family, the staff, and the institution itself. The breaking point was reached. The plan was blocked. And yet, as anyone familiar with royal history knows, no action is without consequence. William's decisiveness set the stage for future conflicts, media scrutiny, and personal reckonings that neither brother could fully anticipate. And so, as William moved to consolidate authority, protect the monarchy, and maintain order, a quiet tension settled over the family. A tension that would define interactions, influence decisions, and color the public perception of both brothers for years to come. The breaking point was more than a personal moment. It was a pivot in history. It was the moment when duty overshadowed desire, when strategy eclipsed sentiment, and when a future king made a decision that would echo far beyond the palace walls. But the consequences of that breaking point were only beginning to unfold. Because even as William acted, he could not have foreseen the full impact of his decision. The media storm, Harry's emotional response, and the unexpected rise of Sir Timothy, the man who would now step into the void left by Harry's blocked return. Imagine being king. Not just any king, but a man balancing history, legacy, and the unrelenting gaze of the world. Every word you speak is dissected, every gesture analyzed, and every decision, no matter how personal, carries weight that stretches far beyond your own family. This is the position Charles found himself in as he navigated the fallout from Harry's attempted return and William's decisive blocking of it. It was never going to be simple. For King Charles, the dilemma was both deeply personal and profoundly institutional. On one hand, he was a father witnessing the widening gap between his sons, a man acutely aware of the emotional fallout caused by years of tension and public scrutiny. On the other hand, he was a monarch whose authority depended on maintaining order, hierarchy, and the perception of a united family. Balancing these two roles, father and king, was an almost impossible task. The first challenge came with perspective. Charles, more than anyone, understood both sides of the conflict. He remembered Harry as a boy, curious, impulsive, and fiercely loyal to his family. He knew William as a man of discipline, restraint, and unwavering sense of duty. He could see Harry's longing to return, to reconcile, to contribute meaningfully to the institution he was born into. He could also see William's reasoning, a desire to protect the monarchy from instability and precedent that could set it on a dangerous path. But understanding is not the same as deciding. Charles reportedly spent hours in private contemplation, weighing potential outcomes, consulting with trusted advisors, and reviewing historical precedent. He knew that a royal who leaves and then attempts a partial return is almost unprecedented. History offers examples, yes, but the modern media landscape adds a layer of complexity that previous generations never faced. Today, every action is magnified, every personal grievance made public, and every emotional fissure has the potential to become an international headline. The dilemma was acute. Allow Harry to return, and the monarchy risks appearing fragmented and inconsistent. Block his return, and the monarchy risks further alienating a prince who, despite being thousands of miles away, still commands global attention. Charles had to ask himself, which is the greater risk, family discord or institutional compromise? And then there was timing. Charles's health, while publicly understated, has been a point of internal concern for some palace insiders. The king is navigating a period of transition, with William poised to inherit more responsibilities as heir apparent. In this delicate window, any hint of family fracture could have outsized consequences, not just for public perception, but for governance within the palace itself. According to insiders, the king's meetings with advisors were tense. Discussions often centered around one central question: how do we maintain unity without compromising principles? One aide reportedly phrased it bluntly: we either let Harry back and risk chaos, or we stop him now and risk estrangement. There's no middle ground. Charles, acutely aware of both brothers' emotions, found himself caught in the crossfire. He reportedly tried to mediate quietly, reaching out to Harry with private letters and discreet phone calls, suggesting opportunities for compromise. Yet every gesture was carefully measured, knowing that public missteps could amplify already fragile tensions. And then came William's decisive action. When William quietly reassigned Harry's duties to Sir Timothy, Charles reportedly understood immediately what had happened. There was no need for confrontation. The message was clear. William had acted to protect the institution. And yet, even in understanding, Charles felt the weight of the personal cost. His son Harry was effectively blocked from a partial return, and the emotional ramifications could not be ignored. The king's dilemma, therefore, was not simply about strategy. It was about reconciliation, loyalty, and legacy. Could he support William's decision without alienating Harry? Could he maintain the monarchy's stability while preserving the family bond he valued so deeply? Could he, as a father, remain impartial while acting as sovereign? Charles reportedly reflected on his own past. He remembered his relationship with Diana, the strain of public scrutiny, and the lessons learned from history. He knew that emotional decisions often clash with institutional needs. He remembered Edward VIII, the ultimate example of a personal desire overriding duty, and the ripple effects that decision had caused for generations. He knew that the monarchy, above all, is built on consistency and clarity. And yet, he also understood Harry's perspective. He knew what it felt like to be misunderstood, misrepresented, and restricted by expectations. He knew the emotional toll of living in a system that demands duty above personal freedom. Charles, perhaps more than anyone, empathized with the pain of a son caught between love and obligation. The dilemma deepened as media speculation grew. Reporters and analysts quickly sensed tension between the brothers, framing the narrative as a feud between William and Harry, with Charles caught in the middle. Headlines suggested indecision, weakness, and potential conflict. The king's every word, or lack thereof, was scrutinized, interpreted as approval or condemnation. Every personal correspondence risked being leaked and weaponized. To navigate this, Charles reportedly relied heavily on a small circle of confidants, advisors who understood both palace protocol and family dynamics. These insiders offered guidance, perspective, and historical context, but ultimately, the decision rested on Charles's shoulders. Every recommendation, no matter how sound, had to be weighed against the potential emotional cost. Meanwhile, Harry, thousands of miles away, remained largely unaware of the full scope of the king's internal struggle. He knew William had blocked his return, and he knew the public was watching, but he had no insight into the private deliberations taking place in the palace. For him, the rejection felt final, absolute, and deeply personal. And for Charles, this added another layer of complexity: how to support the institution while managing the emotional fallout for both sons. Insiders suggest that Charles tried to maintain neutrality, but neutrality in the royal family is often a precarious stance. By not publicly siding with either brother, he risked criticism from both sides. By intervening, he risked appearing biased. By remaining silent, he risked being perceived as disengaged. Every option carried significant consequences, and yet the king acted. Privately, he communicated with both brothers, attempting to mediate and soften the blow. He reportedly encouraged Harry to focus on personal projects and global initiatives, framing them as valuable contributions to the monarchy without requiring a formal return. To William, he offered counsel on diplomacy, reminding him of the delicate balance between familial loyalty and institutional responsibility. But despite these efforts, the king's dilemma persisted. The core issue remained unchanged. How do you reconcile a family rift while safeguarding centuries of tradition? How do you lead an institution that demands unwavering order while nurturing a son who seeks independence? How do you reconcile love, duty, and legacy in a world that watches your every move? The dilemma reached its peak when the king realized the full extent of William's decisiveness. Sir Timothy's emergence as the new custodian of Harry's duties was not just a strategic move, it was a symbolic one. The message was clear: Harry's return was no longer a possibility, and the institution had adapted to function without him. For Charles, this was both relief and heartbreak. Relief that the monarchy's stability was intact, heartbreak that his son's relationship had fractured further. And yet, as he navigated this complex terrain, Charles reportedly understood one fundamental truth. The monarchy survives not because of individual desires, but because of consistency, order, and clarity of purpose. Emotion, while deeply human, must sometimes be subordinated to duty. The king's dilemma, therefore, was never fully resolvable. Every choice carried risk. Every action had consequence. Every gesture could either heal or harm. And in the quiet corridors of the palace, Charles carried this knowledge with the weight of centuries of tradition pressing down on him. But the story does not end with internal deliberation. The decisions made during this period set off a chain reaction, one that would affect not only William and Harry, but the monarchy, the public perception of royal authority, and the rise of Sir Timothy as a central figure in royal operations. In the end, the king's dilemma was a reflection of the broader conflict at the heart of this family. The tension between personal loyalty and institutional duty, between love and responsibility, between the bonds of blood and the demands of monarchy. And as the palace prepared for the next wave of decisions, one thing was clear: the king's choice, or indecision, would shape not only the lives of his sons, but the very future of the British monarchy itself. Every monarchy has its unsung figures, those who operate behind the scenes, quietly steering the course of history while the world watches the princes, princesses, and headlines. And in the story of Harry's blocked return, one such figure suddenly emerged into prominence: Sir Timothy. Until recently, most of the public had never heard his name. He wasn't a household figure like William, Harry, or even Charles. He didn't make public speeches, attend high-profile events, or appear in glossy magazine spreads. But inside palace walls, Sir Timothy was a known quantity, a loyal advisor, a trusted confidant, and a man whose influence stretched far deeper than most realized. The decision to assign him Harry's former duties didn't happen overnight. William reportedly studied Sir Timothy's track record, evaluating his loyalty, discretion, and understanding of the institution. It wasn't just about filling roles, it was about securing continuity, stability, and control. Sir Timothy, insiders say, was a man who could step into a highly visible position without challenging the hierarchy, a man whose loyalty to the monarchy would never waver. But who exactly is Sir Timothy? Reports suggest he has a background that perfectly blends military discipline, charitable oversight, and intimate knowledge of palace operations. His early career included service in the armed forces, where he earned respect for his strategic thinking and leadership. Later, he became closely involved with royal charities, building networks of influence and understanding the subtle balance between public visibility and private discretion. And for decades, he served as a quiet advisor to senior royals, including Prince Philip, offering counsel on everything from protocol to crisis management. To William, Sir Timothy represented the ideal solution. Here was a man who could step into Harry's roles and handle them with competence, respect, and absolute discretion. No media spectacle, no personal agenda, no potential for scandal. The contrast with Harry's proposed return couldn't have been starker. Where Harry brought unpredictability, celebrity scrutiny, and emotional complexity, Sir Timothy brought reliability, steadiness, and complete alignment with royal protocol. And yet, the decision to elevate Sir Timothy carried its own risks. For one, it signaled to Harry that the doors were firmly closed. There was no ambiguity, no compromise, no room for negotiation. Sir Timothy wasn't just replacing Harry's duties. He was symbolically taking his place in the institutional hierarchy. For Harry, that was more than a professional setback. It was a personal affront. At the same time, William had to manage the optics. The public, unaware of Sir Timothy's decades of behind-the-scenes service, might question why an unfamiliar figure was suddenly entrusted with high-profile royal responsibilities. To mitigate this, insiders report, William framed the transition as a continuation of existing initiatives rather than a replacement of Harry. Sir Timothy was presented as a long-standing supporter of royal causes, someone whose expertise would ensure continuity and stability. And it worked. On paper, Sir Timothy's appointment appeared logical, even unremarkable. But within palace circles, the significance was profound. By choosing Sir Timothy, William was sending a clear message. The monarchy operates according to rules, not personal sentiment. Loyalty and reliability outweigh celebrity or emotional appeal, and the institution comes before the individual. But the rise of Sir Timothy wasn't just about loyalty and stability. Sources suggest there was also a personal dimension. William and Sir Timothy reportedly share a history that goes back decades, including mentoring and private discussions about leadership, duty, and the pressures of public life. This relationship, built on trust and shared understanding, made Sir Timothy uniquely qualified to act in William's stead. He wasn't merely a substitute. He was a strategic extension of William's authority, and the timing couldn't have been more critical. As Harry contemplated his partial return, William needed someone who could seamlessly assume responsibilities without hesitation or oversight. Sir Timothy's readiness allowed William to act decisively, effectively blocking Harry's plan while maintaining operational continuity. The move was both tactical and symbolic, reinforcing William's authority and underscoring the seriousness of the decision. But Sir Timothy's emergence also had emotional ramifications. For the royal family, his appointment highlighted the growing distance between William and Harry. Where once Harry might have expected a warm welcome or an opportunity to negotiate, the presence of Sir Timothy made it clear that the path back was closed. For palace staff and advisors, the decision reinforced the hierarchy, signaling that personal ambition or celebrity status could not override institutional priorities. Interestingly, Sir Timothy himself reportedly expressed a sense of duty rather than ambition. He understood the delicate nature of the role, the potential scrutiny, and the symbolic weight of replacing a high-profile figure like Harry. Sources describe him as conscientious, discreet, and deeply aware of the historical and emotional context of his appointment. He was not seeking fame or recognition. He was fulfilling a responsibility, knowing that the monarchy's stability depended on his careful execution of these duties. And yet, despite his competence and loyalty, Sir Timothy's rise also introduced subtle tension within the family. Insiders note that his close alignment with William could be perceived as a consolidation of power, raising questions about influence, favoritism, and internal alliances. While Harry was far from the palace, the symbolic message was clear. William now had a trusted ally who could act on his behalf, reducing the likelihood of any future challenges to his authority. The public would eventually notice the shift, though not immediately. Sir Timothy began attending events, overseeing charities, and representing the monarchy in capacities previously associated with Harry. His professionalism and discretion quickly earned praise from the media and palace observers, but the underlying tension, the reason for his appointment, remained largely invisible. Most outside observers interpreted his role as a natural succession of duties, unaware that it was, in fact, a carefully orchestrated maneuver to prevent Harry's reintegration. In this way, Sir Timothy's rise illustrates a crucial principle of royal strategy. Appearances matter as much as reality. The monarchy must maintain an image of continuity, stability, and competence, even while making deeply consequential decisions behind closed doors. Sir Timothy's quiet effectiveness allowed William to enforce this principle without drawing attention to the family conflict at its core. And yet, while the operational side of the transition was smooth, the emotional dimension remained unresolved. William had effectively cut off his brother, assigning his responsibilities to a man who could execute them flawlessly, but who also symbolized the impossibility of reconciliation under current circumstances. For William, it was a relief. The plan was blocked, the monarchy's continuity preserved. For Harry, it was a reminder that despite his efforts, The institution would always place duty above personal desire. But the story doesn't end with Sir Timothy assuming his new duties. His appointment also introduced a layer of unpredictability. While loyal to William, he is a man with experience, influence, and his own understanding of palace politics. His decisions, advice, and counsel could shape events in ways neither William nor Harry fully anticipated. And in a palace where every action carries historical weight, even a trusted advisor can become a pivotal figure in unfolding drama. In essence, Sir Timothy's emergence was both solution and complication. He provided William with the means to enforce his authority and secure the institution. At the same time, his rise made clear the permanence of Harry's exclusion, deepening emotional rifts and setting the stage for future conflicts. And as history often shows, the most significant players in royal affairs are not always the ones visible to the public. Sometimes, the true influence comes from those who operate quietly, strategically, and effectively, exactly the role Sir Timothy now occupies. So, while the world focused on headlines about brothers and memoirs, a more subtle but profound shift was occurring behind palace doors. The monarchy's machinery was recalibrating. Authority was being consolidated. Loyalties were being tested. And at the center of it all stood Sir Timothy, the man whose loyalty, discretion, and competence would define the execution of Harry's blocked return and, potentially, the course of the monarchy itself. Behind every major royal decision lies layers of negotiation, discussion, and often, secrets the public will never see. And in the case of Prince Harry's blocked return, one of the most pivotal yet hidden elements was what insiders now refer to as the hidden agreement. This agreement wasn't formalized in a public document or announced with a press release. It was whispered in palace corridors, discussed in private meetings, and understood implicitly by only a handful of trusted aides. Yet it played a critical role in shaping the course of events and ensuring that the monarchy remained firmly in control. The story begins, as so many of these internal maneuvers do, with tension and necessity. After William decisively blocked Harry's plan, there remained a pressing concern. What if Harry pushed further? What if the public spectacle forced the monarchy to respond, to justify the decision, or worse, to reconsider it? The potential for embarrassment, misinterpretation, and emotional fallout was enormous. To mitigate this, senior advisors reportedly orchestrated a secret understanding, a set of unspoken rules meant to contain conflict and preserve stability. At the center of this was Sir Timothy. His appointment, while public in function, was also part of the broader hidden agreement. According to palace insiders, Timothy's role was not simply to manage Harry's former responsibilities. He was also tasked with monitoring the ripple effects of the decision, advising William on potential complications, and acting as a gatekeeper for any future attempts by Harry to return. In essence, he was both a steward and a safeguard, a living embodiment of the agreement's conditions. The hidden agreement, insiders suggest, had several key components. First, it reaffirmed William's authority over all royal duties associated with Harry. No patronage, charity, or official role could be transferred back without William's explicit consent. This removed ambiguity and ensured that any attempt at reintegration would require negotiation, a negotiation firmly controlled by the heir to the throne. Second, the agreement emphasized discretion. All parties involved, including Sir Timothy, senior aides, and advisors, were bound by confidentiality. The palace could not afford leaks, as any public discussion of the decision could spark media speculation, fan outrage, or political commentary. Maintaining secrecy was essential to controlling the narrative, both internally and externally. Third, the agreement created a contingency framework. While Harry's return was blocked, the monarchy had to prepare for every possible scenario. Media backlash, unexpected public support for Harry, or private attempts at negotiation. The hidden agreement outlined steps to address these contingencies, from pre-approved talking points to carefully coordinated media messaging. This meticulous planning underscored the seriousness with which William, Charles, and their advisors approached the situation. But what made the hidden agreement truly remarkable was its emotional component. It wasn't purely procedural. Palace insiders emphasized that it also accounted for the psychological dynamics between William, Harry, and Charles. By codifying boundaries, responsibilities, and channels of communication, the agreement allowed the family to manage tension without outright confrontation. It acknowledged the reality of fractured relationships while ensuring that the institution could continue to function smoothly. Harry, of course, was unaware of much of this behind-the-scenes orchestration. From his perspective, the reassignment of duties to Sir Timothy felt like a unilateral decision, a blunt message that he had been excluded. What he didn't know was that this move was carefully negotiated among senior advisors and family members to prevent escalation. The hidden agreement wasn't about exclusion for exclusion's sake. It was about containment, strategy, and long-term planning. Insiders also described the agreement as having an unspoken moral dimension. William, Charles, and Sir Timothy reportedly agreed that Harry's contributions were still valuable, but had to be channeled outside the formal structure of the monarchy. This allowed Harry to maintain a connection to causes he cared about without undermining William's authority or the institution's integrity. In other words, the hidden agreement created a controlled environment in which Harry could continue to have influence, but only in a capacity that did not threaten the monarchy. Interestingly, the hidden agreement also highlights the strategic brilliance of William's leadership style. Rather than relying solely on confrontation, he utilized structure, foresight, and delegation. By empowering Sir Timothy, codifying boundaries, and preparing contingency plans, William ensured that he retained control over the situation while minimizing the risk of public spectacle or emotional escalation. The hidden agreement was a masterclass in measured decision-making, demonstrating that in royal affairs, the most powerful moves often occur behind closed doors. But the agreement was not without its critics. Some palace insiders reportedly viewed it as overly rigid, warning that it might deepen resentment and further strain relationships. They argued that while the agreement preserved institutional integrity, it could alienate Harry permanently and create long-term fractures within the family. Others countered that the monarchy could not afford flexibility, that consistency, clarity, and hierarchy were paramount. In addition, there were concerns about the optics of Sir Timothy's role. While he was undoubtedly competent and discreet, his sudden rise to prominence highlighted the permanent absence of Harry from key duties. For the public, the story appeared simple. A prince blocked, a loyal aide steps in. But for those within the palace, the implications were far more complex, a signal of consolidation, loyalty, and the limits of familial influence over institutional decisions. The hidden agreement also incorporated a temporal element. It wasn't designed to be permanent in a rigid sense, but was intended to manage the present crisis while allowing for future adaptation. Advisors reportedly built in review mechanisms, informal discussions, evaluations of public response, and assessments of family dynamics to determine whether adjustments might be necessary. This allowed the monarchy to maintain control while retaining the flexibility to respond to changing circumstances. In practice, the agreement created a delicate equilibrium. William exercised authority, Sir Timothy ensured operational continuity, and Charles navigated his dual role as mediator and sovereign. Harry, meanwhile, was excluded from the formal structure but not from the broader network of royal influence, allowing him to remain involved in select initiatives from a distance. And yet, despite the careful planning, the hidden agreement carried inherent tension. By defining boundaries, it underscored exclusion. By controlling communication, it limited negotiation. By centralizing authority, it emphasized hierarchy. For Harry, this was an unmistakable signal. The door to partial reintegration was closed, and the monarchy's priorities came first. This tension, however, was also the agreement's strength. By formalizing expectations, it minimized the potential for impulsive action, public outcry, or media scandal. It allowed the monarchy to act decisively while maintaining an appearance of order and unity. And it created a clear roadmap for managing relationships, responsibilities, and public perception in an environment where every misstep is magnified. The hidden agreement, in short, was a masterstroke of strategy, discretion, and foresight. It reflected the monarchy's ability to adapt to unprecedented challenges, balancing familial dynamics with institutional imperatives. It was not merely a document or a set of rules. It was a framework for navigating the complex intersection of emotion, duty, and public expectation. And as events continued to unfold, the agreement would prove its significance. Every decision made, every duty reassigned, and every interaction mediated would be informed by the principles established in this hidden framework. It ensured that the monarchy could operate effectively, even amid the emotional and logistical complexities of blocking a prince's return. But the hidden agreement also planted seeds for future tension. Harry, unaware of its intricacies, could interpret it as betrayal or exclusion. The public, unaware of its details, could misread its implications. And even within the palace, the careful balance it created required constant vigilance, strategic foresight, and emotional restraint. In other words, the hidden agreement was both shield and sword, a tool for preserving stability, but also a reminder of the underlying fragility of family ties when duty and legacy collide. And what came next? The first public signs of Sir Timothy's influence, the subtle reinforcement of William's authority, and the emotional fallout in California would test the agreement in ways no one could have fully anticipated. Thousands of miles away from the ornate corridors of Buckingham Palace, life continued under an entirely different sky. In California, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle faced the reality of a decision that had already been executed thousands of miles away. William had blocked Harry's return, and Sir Timothy had been assigned his duties. For Harry, this was more than a professional setback. It was a deeply personal shock, a sharp confirmation that distance, status, and loyalty within the royal family were not negotiable. The news reportedly reached Harry through a mix of official communications and leaks to the press. By the time he fully grasped the magnitude of what had happened, the situation had already been solidified. Harry, who had imagined a partial return as a chance to reconcile, was confronted with a stark reality. The monarchy had closed the door. The reassignment of his responsibilities to Sir Timothy was more than symbolic. It was definitive. Sources close to the couple describe a range of emotions: disbelief, frustration, and profound sadness. Harry had long understood the complexities of royal duty, but he may have underestimated the decisiveness of William's response. He had hoped for negotiation, discussion, or at least some form of compromise. Instead, he was met with finality. The man he once considered both a brother and a fellow prince of the realm had acted in absolute alignment with the institution, leaving little room for personal considerations. The fallout was not merely emotional. It had strategic implications as well. Harry and Meghan had built a life in California that straddled celebrity, philanthropy, and independence. But the news of blocked duties, coupled with the global scrutiny that inevitably followed, forced them to reassess how they interacted with both the British public and the royal family. Every media appearance, every philanthropic initiative, and even casual public statements became part of a larger narrative, a narrative shaped by William, the monarchy, and the unseen framework of the hidden agreement. For Meghan, the situation was particularly intense. As a former actress turned public figure and royal consort, she understood the power of media narratives. Insiders suggest she approached the fallout with both strategic foresight and protective instincts, seeking to shield Harry from emotional overreach while simultaneously managing the public perception of their position. Her influence, combined with Harry's visibility, made the California fallout a complex interplay of media, family, and public diplomacy. Reports indicate that Harry attempted private channels to understand the full scope of the decision. Calls with advisors, discreet messages, and attempts at reconciliation with William reportedly followed, but all were met with polite firmness. The monarchy had acted, and the hierarchy was clear. William's decision stood. Harry could not undo it, and any attempt to circumvent it risked both public scandal and personal backlash. Meanwhile, the media narrative in California began to take shape. Tabloids, celebrity outlets, and mainstream news sources highlighted the royal feud, framing Harry's blocked return as a dramatic story of familial discord. Headlines emphasized conflict, betrayal, and emotional fallout, painting a picture of brothers at odds while the monarchy remained stoic and unyielding. For Harry and Meghan, the narrative was both a challenge and an opportunity. A challenge because of the intense scrutiny, and an opportunity because their global platform allowed them to subtly frame their perspective without directly confronting William or the palace. Sources close to Harry describe a period of introspection. He reportedly reflected on the years since leaving royal duties, considering whether the dream of reconciliation was realistic. He weighed the desire for connection against the reality of institutional rigidity. For someone who had left in pursuit of independence, this moment in California underscored the tension between personal aspiration and familial obligation. The couple's inner circle also became crucial during this period. Friends, advisors, and legal counsel reportedly helped manage the communication lines, ensuring that public statements were measured and private grievances remained contained. The goal was not to escalate the conflict, but to navigate the fallout strategically, maintaining dignity while acknowledging the emotional weight of the situation. In California, the impact was tangible. Social media buzzed with speculation, while global audiences debated the motives, loyalties, and consequences of the blocked return. Harry's charitable initiatives, once seen as separate from the monarchy, were now scrutinized through a lens of family tension. Every public appearance, every announcement, every partnership carried a dual significance, advancing philanthropic goals while navigating the complex legacy of familial estrangement. Meanwhile, Sir Timothy quietly assumed responsibilities in the UK, representing the monarchy with precision and discretion. For observers in California, this quiet effectiveness only heightened the contrast. William and Sir Timothy maintained control, stability, and public composure, while Harry and Meghan dealt with the emotional and strategic repercussions from afar. The geographic distance between them symbolized a deeper divide, one that was not merely physical but emotional, institutional, and cultural. Harry reportedly felt the weight of historical precedent. As a member of a family with centuries of tradition, he understood that his actions, responses, and even personal feelings would be scrutinized for signs of defiance or weakness. Yet the California fallout also offered him perspective. He could continue his work independently, leverage global influence, and retain agency over his life without returning to a system that had already closed its doors. Insiders suggest that during this period, the couple made deliberate choices to focus on long-term objectives. This included philanthropic initiatives, public awareness campaigns, and strategic media engagements. Each decision was informed by the understanding that the monarchy's operational structure in the UK had shifted. Sir Timothy was now the gatekeeper of responsibilities that Harry might have reclaimed, and William had asserted authority decisively. Any attempt to engage directly with the monarchy risked destabilizing both the relationship and the institution. At the same time, the emotional impact was profound. Harry reportedly experienced feelings of exclusion, loss, and frustration, emotions intensified by the distance and the global attention on his family. He confronted the reality that familial reconciliation, while desirable, could not be forced and must navigate the unyielding priorities of institutional authority. For someone who had once embraced the role of royal duty, this realization was both painful and instructive. Meanwhile, Meghan's support proved critical. Her strategic thinking, media savvy, and emotional intelligence allowed the couple to maintain cohesion while processing the fallout. Insiders describe her as both a stabilizing influence and a partner in strategic navigation, helping Harry manage the complex interplay of emotion, public attention, and institutional reality. The California fallout also had subtle ripple effects within the UK. Advisors monitoring media and public opinion noted the contrast between the monarchy's internal consolidation and Harry's external narrative. While William and Sir Timothy reinforced order, the public perception of estrangement, conflict, and familial tension created a dual narrative, one of stability at the institution's core and emotional turbulence at the family's periphery. By the end of this period, the California fallout had become a defining moment in the ongoing saga between the brothers.